Have a seat. Normally, at this time, I would be dismissing the kids, but we're not doing that today. Today, we're going to talk about worship, and a cool thing happened this week that we didn't plan. Aiden, my youngest, who is typically leaving at this point in time, was sick on Thursday, and so he came to work with me, and he actually got to help kind of plan the service for today. And so he picked out a video that we'll show here in just a few minutes as we talk about this. But as we go into this, we want to just kind of remind you on the trip that we've been on. Let me see if I can get to that slide. We've been kind of walking through these spiritual disciplines. We've been talking about these ways in which we can engage our emotions to reconnect with God at an emotional level. And as we've talked about, in every relationship, we typically start out in an emotional connection, but we often find ourselves kind of moving from that in love phase of a relationship to just the love phase, where some of those emotions tend to fall off to the side because we get caught up in everyday life and normal activities, and so we allow some of that emotional to go down. Because here's the truth of it. Here's the matter in it. We don't want to live our entire life based on emotions. Because when we do that, we go through life with extreme highs, extreme lows, and not a lot of days in the middle. There's something about the opportunity to kind of move beyond that emotion and move into a stage where you have more knowledge about it, more internal understandings of it. And if you're in this room and you've been married more than 6 months, you probably understand exactly what I'm talking about. If you're still dating someone right now, then you have no idea, because you're probably still in that phase where you still feel emotional about things. And so these are just some opportunities, some steps, some ways that we can get engaged and deepen our walk and deepen our understanding of walking with God. And so we have here on the board, we started looking at meditation as an opportunity to just kind of stop, spend a moment, remove all the distractions, and focus on God and what He is in our lives. We talked about fasting, that opportunity of removing the temptations around us and spending some time where we intentionally set aside time where we give something up to be able to remind ourselves that God is the most important thing. We talked about simplicity, where we get rid of the things that compete for time, the things that compete for finances, the things that compete for all of our distractions in life, and just removing those things so that we are simply with God. We talked about solitude, getting alone, removing the noise of the many other conversations and interactions that we have, and just focusing on being alone with God. We talked about confession. This was removing the pride. And this confession we talked about is not just the kind of confession where we admit that we were wrong on things, but we also admit who God is. And so that's really important. Then we talked about celebration, where we take those confessions and we make them aloud for the world to hear. And that Sunday, we actually took time and gave people an opportunity to share their testimonies. We talked last week about sharing our walk as we seek guidance, understanding that we are put into a group. We talked about how almost all of the Bible is written to a congregation of people, not to an individual person. But we, in our Americanized individualistic society, tend to take everything very singularly and very personal. But the reason that church is important is not because you can come and listen to an awesome speaker, but so that you can come and be engaged with people who have experienced life. So you can be in here as Lee, Michael, and Dana are celebrating their 1-year anniversary today. They can be in here with Mr. David and Miss Kathy, and they can ask questions about, how did you make it this long, right? Because we all have something to offer. One of the statements that I made last Sunday, and I made again on Wednesday night when we were talking about this, is it's a quote that comes from a pastor up in Chicago, and it says, "Armed with enough humility, we can learn something from everyone." And so, like this week, I got to learn from Aiden as he talked to me about what this next thing is. Talked about worship. What is worship? Worship is about sharing our joy. We often relegate it to the singing world. You know, worship is what Brian and Leslie and Tim and Bob did up here a few minutes ago. Well, yes, they did, but that's not worship. It's a form of worship. And so I asked Aiden this week, I said, "Hey, what is worship?" And so he gave me a ton of answers. And so what I want to do is actually start with you. This is the interactive part that's like when we're teaching a class. I actually want you to speak to me. So when I ask this question, I would love for you don't even have to raise your hand. You can be belligerent that way. And you can just shout out your answer. What is worship? Prayer. Connecting with God. Praising Him. Giving up your time. Intimacy. I haven't heard a wrong answer yet, so you guys can keep naming them. Listening to your local Christian station, singing with it all the time. Absolutely. I heard something over here same time. Warfare. Giving God the glory that is due to His name. Worship is all of this. Worship is not that 20-minute segment in church on Sunday morning where you open up a hymnal or watch slides on a screen and pretend to sing. Because I didn't hear you in all the songs this morning. I saw a lot of lips moving, but I didn't hear a lot of sound coming out. But worship is not just that. Worship is choosing to share the joy that God has given us. Now that can be turning it back and sharing it with Him. You know, I am a child of God. You know, that's a worshipful song to me. And there are many, many others out there. But that's only one way, but that's where we tend to go when somebody goes, "Oh, worship was good this morning," or "Worship wasn't good this morning." Everyone around you assumes you're talking about the singing. I want to share something with you. Worship is what you make of it. Guys, I have been to church services where I have no idea what the speaker said. I have no idea what songs were sang, but I worshiped the whole time. I have been in worship services that God's mighty hand moved in the middle of it, and what was intended to be a 45-minute service lasted 3.5 hours. And that was good. For me especially, who is like a time guy, anyone who's been in a meeting with me knows that I'm like, "Hey, we're going to meet from X to X, and then we're done." But for God to move enough, sharing. Being nice. Thank you, Vivian. Absolutely. Giving up our talent, time, and finances. Is that what you said? Okay, good. I don't always hear really well. Turn to you this way. Say again, Malachi. Can someone repeat that? I still didn't hear. Oh, that's good and deep. Thanks, Kai. Reading and applying God's word. Does it sometimes involve songs? I grew up in a family where everybody sang. My sister and my brother will both tell you they cannot sing. They are liars, and they can sing really well. My mom, I can remember, this is so off subject, but the kids will love this. I can remember a point in time in our family, we were traveling, and when we were traveling, that meant there was music on. And for whatever reason, my mom was singing The Candyman. And we were just south of Hot Springs, going across a bridge, and a car in the other lane went to pass a slower car in the other lane, and they were in a Corvette, and they were flying. And they realized as they went to go around that we were coming head on with them, and they went straight across to the shoulder on the other side and went around us. But what came out of my mom's mouth at that moment was, "The Candyman can," So for a long time we talked about how well the Candyman could scream. But that was, so in my family, music was a big part of it. But how else? How else? Amy, you were about to say something when I broke off on my story. Yeah, acknowledging him out loud or internally. Yeah, very much so. Helping people when they need help. That is a great way to worship. Accepting what God has for us when He offers it. That is sometimes really tough. We don't always want what He's offering. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. So when we think about serving other people, there's actually two people that benefit in doing that. Them and us. I can tell you, I've been to South America twice, to the country of Paraguay, and I can promise you I didn't do near as much for those kids that I went down there to serve as what they did for me. But God met me there. It's pretty cool. So, all right, here's a scripture for us. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Where in this scripture does it say anything about singing? Right? But to offer your body as a living sacrifice. So, what does it mean to sacrifice? This is the back and forth part. What's that, Miss Jean? Be willing to serve and to be served. I can't hear him. Give up something to do something else. Absolutely. Does Vivian have insight? Get out of your comfort zone. Absolutely. Now this is an interesting one because the term on this is to be a living sacrifice. Now that's really interesting because what that means is I'm giving up my life to live it the way I want to live it. Does that mean your life will be unhappy? No, it actually means quite the opposite. If you can let go of the things that you believe are the most important and open your heart to what God says the most important things are, it changes. Because giving up our desires, typical man desires, and woman desires, I meant mankind, but typical man desires are, I want to be successful, I want to be really good at my job. I want to be really good at being a parent. I want to be really good at making money, or all of these kind of things that we tend to put as these big things. I want to set the best example for my kids. I want my kids to have the things I didn't have growing up. That's a big one I hear all the time. And that's typically said by parents who do everything with their kids except go to church. And so that's a tough one for me often, because in my opinion, if I match my heart with God's heart and I give my kids the most important things, the most important thing is learning how to have a relationship with God. And when you do that, you'll find that you define success differently, that you find the term wealth differently. Because wealth is not about accumulating a bunch of stuff. It's not how many four-wheelers and Rangers and how many deer stands and how many sewing machines or how many. It's not these things, because these things take more money to manage. But it's about, if I align my heart with God's, that is what truly sacrificing, a living sacrifice, looks like, and that's also true worship. All right, so I'm going to go to Aiden's video at this point in time. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Evan Almighty. Evan Almighty is I wouldn't consider it a Christian movie, although it's got great Christian undertones to it, as it's kind of a story of the reliving of a modern day Noah, and it's played out in a congressman who has just gotten to Washington D.C. and he's asked to kind of give up an awful lot to follow God's command. And so this is about a 5.5, 6 minute video, but it kind of explains this, and it explains the concept to me, I believe. It explains the greatest concept of worship. And so, Miss Susan, I'll turn it over to you. Tim, would you kill these spots?
This is 614. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Gopher wood.
Gopher wood. Get it?
Go.
Well, it's not really gopher wood. I just like the word play. No, it's pine and maple. It was clear cut from this valley to make room for all those houses.
Excuse me, do I know you?
Not as well as I'd like. I see you got my housewarming gift.
That was you? You sent those? What are they for? Hey.
Genesis chapter 6, verse 14. I want you to build an ark.
You want me to build an ark?
Yes.
So that's why the tools, and you are responsible for the wood? All right, well, let's just start over. Hello, I am Evan Baxter.
Born June 15th, 1962. 8 pounds, 11 ounces. Mother's Carol Ann Parker. Father Eugene Evan Baxter.
Ooh, you have internet access. Very impressive. Do you also have cable?
You're a clean freak. You care much too much about your outward appearance. Your left nipple is a 1/4 inch higher than your right nipple, and when you were a little boy, you were afraid of Gumby.
Who are you?
I'm God.
You're God.
Yes. And I want you, Evan Baxter, to build an ark.
Okay, you know what? This conversation is a little thing I like to call over. But I gotta get going, because frankly, I have an ark to build. Busy. Nice meeting you. Take care. Oh, and... All See you later. Oh, no, 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 no! No! Okay, no, 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 oh, go! No! No! Oh! Woo! Oh! No, 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 no! Oh, my God! Guys, no, no! Get out! Get out! Ow! Ow! Oh, my hair! Gentlemen, good to see you. So, you're really him, aren't you?
You want more proof? I haven't done the pillar of salt thing in a while.
That's all right, I believe you. I don't understand why you chose me.
You want to change the world, son. So do I.
What? Why an ark? I mean, that's like flood territory. You wouldn't do that again. You wouldn't do that. Would you do that?
Let's just say that whatever I do because I love you.
Well, then you have to understand that this whole building an ark thing is really not part of my plans here. I need to settle into my house. I need to make a good impression at work. What?
Your plans.
What are you talking? We're talking about an ark, right? I mean, an ark? An ark is huge. I don't even know where I would begin.
Al, I hear that a lot. People want to change the world, don't know how to begin. You want to know how to change the world, son? One act of random kindness at a time. Build the ark. I'll tell you what. You build it, I'll fill it. And if anybody asks, tell them a flood's coming. Oh, and you might need this.
Okay, so what do? I grab the wood and then... Oh, okay. You know, that's just cruel. Do you see him? I don't see him.
Hey.
Hey. What are you doing here?
Just hanging out with some old friends.
You knew all along, didn't you? You knew the dam was unstable. If it hadn't been for the ark, my family, the neighbors, I fought you every step of the way.
Yes, but you did it.
So you had nothing to do with the flood? Like where the ark landed exactly?
I gave you a little shove at the end. Sue me. You did good, son. You changed the world.
No, I didn't.
Well, let's see. Spending time with your family, making them very happy. Gave that dog a home.
Right, so?
So, how do we change the world?
One act of random kindness at a time.
One act of random kindness.
Wow.
By this, everyone will know you are my disciples, that you have loved one another. So, can we all be world changers? Can we all be professional worshipers? And Aiden, thank you for choosing the videos. I heard people laugh, which was awesome. And so, I want to challenge you. Susan, can we go to that last slide with words on it in there? This is kind of my, it's short today because it's kids. And we know kids have much shorter attention spans than we do as adults, right? No, they don't. We have much shorter attention spans. But who will you share your joy with this week? I want you to think about that. Who will you share your joy with this week? Because that's the worship. That's true and honest worship. And how will you let God know He is the most important? That's worship. And if we want to become good worshipers, we will be people of sharing joy. So, I'm just going to leave it like that. I could carry on and go on, but you get tired of listening to me. So, a couple of things just coming up on our calendar. Brother Kenny has lost his voice due to the sinuses, and so I'm going to share with you just a few things that are going on in your bulletin in the back. One of the things that I forgot to put in the upcoming events is on this sheet. Our North Crossings Young and Married Couples. We've got that Thursday night at 6 o'clock here. Meal and childcare available. Life Choices Banquet is coming up in a couple of weeks. There's a sign-up sheet in the back if you haven't had a chance. The men's ministry, we're trying to do some fun things quarterly with our men's group. And so everyone is invited, all of our men and their sons. So if you are 12 years old to 126 years old, you are welcome to be a part of our men's group. That's going to be at Brother Tim's house on October 14th at 5 p.m. He is going to be cooking a loin wrapped around, a pork loin wrapped around boudin. Now, I'm not even hungry right now, but that sounds like amazing. And so I'm going to be there, and I would like to invite all of our men to be there as well. What can you bring? If you want to bring a side, a dessert, or a drink to share with everyone, that'd be all you'd need to bring. But that's coming up. Also in the back, there's a 5-gallon jar that's got change growing in it. Some of it's folding money, some of it's jingling change, but that money is being used for our youth group who has state youth convention coming up in November, in which I would like to invite this Wednesday night, right after Wednesday night group, any parent of a youth or volunteer with our youth ministry to hang around right after service for about 15 minutes so we can talk about convention and all that kind of fun stuff. But this is how you can support our youth right there. Other things that are coming up, October 30th, the end of the month, just a month from today, we will be meeting up at Grace Place for our quarterly meal that we serve there. We'd love to have any and all of you that can be there. And what else? I think that's everything on my list. So I don't end things quite the way that Kenny does. I don't do responsive readings that well. But here's my blessing to you. May God anoint your path so that each step you take is in His will. May God anoint your work so that everything you do is done unto Him. May God anoint your sight so that everything you see points back to who He is. And may God anoint your hearing so that you hear His words and you're able to share them equally. This week, go and be blessed and be a blessing and worship well. You are dismissed.